what's up and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Liz, your host here at Crimes Untold, and today I have some strange stuff to talk to you about. Also, apologies, my lip's swollen. I don't know why, so it kind of looks like I got filler, but I didn't. That's just my lip. I don't know. I know it's been a long time. Apologies, but we got some strange stuff that has been reported. A beheading of a young victim in where hold on, where was it? In Sacramento County, California. A murder in Maine, that's very close to where I am. An assault on a child here in New Hampshire that was failed to be reported to the parent. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff. So let's get into it today. So reported yesterday at 4:15 in the morning from a female that contacted deputies. This is at the 7500 block of Versailles Way in North Sacramento County, California, for a family disturbance. The female was outside of the residence at the time when the deputies arrived, a short time after she called, and she said that her husband, 28-year-old Andre Demesky, had hurt her and her mother. The mother of this woman was brought to the hospital. She and non-life-threatening injuries. The deputies then went to contact him, Andre Demesky, at the residence, but he absolutely refused to answer the door. But he ended up surrendering peacefully, which I don't get. A short time after this, after he surrenders, whatever took place, they learned that there was still a child within the residence, alone with him. And Demesky possibly could have hurt this child after throwing this being. So obviously, fearing for the safety of this child, this is when the deputies ended up forcing their way into the home and they attempted to detain Mr. Demesky, who was severely uncooperative, and then started resisting them. Hence why I don't really understand the surrender peacefully at first. They then were able to take him into custody, and this is when they would search for the child and they discovered the head of this child. The head of this child was in the bedroom where Demesky was detained and actually talked to. The CABD, which is the Child Abuse Bureau directives, they would typically handle a murder like this or an unaliving of a child. They also responded to the scene along with the scene investigators as well. So it's determined based on so far their investigation is that Andre Demesky initially was involved in the attack on his wife and his mother-in-law. When they both left the residence and waited for the police to show up, this is when he unalived his child, his 1-year-old son. He used a knife, and this is how the murder of his son took place, or unaliving of his son. People have a hard time with the word murder, and I don't understand why. He has been detained. He is ineligible for parole, well, for bail, not parole, and he is scheduled to be in court on Christmas Eve. Obviously, the coroner has to do their thing when it comes to this small child, and this was on the Butte. This was on a Facebook page, and I found this. It's nuts. This is on the Butte County Fires, Accidents, and Crimes page on Facebook. You find a lot of crimes on Facebook and people reporting about them. I'm part of a lot of different true crime groups. So the next thing I briefly want to talk about is something that happened here in New Hampshire. It's a video that's going viral on Facebook right now of a woman that is in her child superintendent's office talking to them and trying to figure out why she wasn't informed of the fact that her child was taped to a chair in a kindergarten classroom in a public school and was never notified about it. I find, as a mom myself, if anything happens to my child, I want to know about it. And in this video, this mom, and his grandparent, his grandma says that he doesn't feel comfortable reporting stuff that happens to himself or anybody at school because of what has happened. Like, a kindergarten student was taped to a chair and his parent wasn't notified when it happened a year ago. A year ago. I feel horribly for this mom. And I know it went in front of the school board because it literally states it in the video. But if you watch the video, it's highly terrifying how monotone the superintendent is, and won't even give them the investigative report when it comes to this woman's son. And she had to find out from other parents that this happened to her child. It's mind-blowing and terrifying because you would automatically assume that, hey, if school officials know exactly the child who this happened to, you should reach out to their parents, right? That would be common sense. But the school never reached out to his parents about it. They had to find out from other parents and teachers that this happened. So clearly something is wrong right there. And I don't know anything else that has happened with it as of yet, but I do know it went up in front of the school board. And it is possible that this lady probably will get in trouble for what she did, for recording in a superintendent's office. But it proves how unjust some things are in education. And a lot of things are, and how people now don't realize the type of behavior that kids are getting away with in school. Um, it's mind blowing. A lot of people don't realize the extent of behavior that happens at school. And you may think that your kids are all well and fine and all they listen, they behave, they're the most well behaved children on the planet. That is so wrong, and you are living in a perfect world. Your child is probably acting up, talking back, doing things that they don't do with you because they're not with you. And this too puts a lot of fear in parents as to what's actually happening with my kids at school. Like, I have a very good communication with my kids' teachers on purpose. I'm very involved with my kids' lives on purpose. Parents are not like that now. So I really hope that parents learn from this, really like know exactly who's in your kid's class, especially when you live in a smaller town. You should know exactly who's in your kid's class, know these kids' parents, things like that. So communication is open. Um, my girls are friends with a lot of kids at school, and I know a lot of their parents on purpose to make sure that they are safe at all times with whomever they're with. But yeah, that's just something that I wanted to talk about because that's basically assault on a child on school property. There was no police log. There's the only investigative report is the one that the superintendent's office has, and it happened on school grounds, and another kid did it, and apparently the whole class was laughing while it happened. So the entire class is involved. So all of these children, except for the victim, should be talked to. The victim themselves is going to need therapy because they were taped to a chair in their class and nothing has been done to help this child. So they're already traumatizing this child. How do you think that what you did, the consequences of what you did, doesn't matter if apparently it was an anonymous email that was sent. It doesn't matter if it was anonymous or not. This child is traumatized and he needs help. And the school should afford that help to him because it's not on his parent, that's on them. This happened to him on school grounds. That is now a school problem, not his parents' problem. That school should take care of it. I'm getting extremely heated, so I'm going to stop talking about it right now. Right now, we're going to Sydney, Maine. So, Sydney, Maine, I can tell you exactly how far away I am from Sydney, Maine, because it's not that far. All right. So Sydney, Maine is in Kennebec County, and Kennebec County is in so Portland, Kennebec County. Maine is obviously giant, so you have to Sydney is, if I give you my zhuzh of um how far away it is from, let's just say, to Concord, New Hampshire, just so you guys are aware. So Sydney, Maine is 2.5 hours from Concord. So I'm about 45-ish minutes from Concord. So about an hour 45 from me is where this happened. So let's talk about what happened, because man, it's yeah. A woman has been charged in the unaliving of a 14-year-old boy. This boy was found at a home in Sydney, Maine. Megan McDonald, who's 39 years old, has been charged with murder. So, at around 5:30 a.m. or before 5:30 a.m., the Maine State Police said that a woman came to the county sheriff's office. Now, this is the Androscoggin County Sheriff's Office. This was yesterday morning to report something that happened at her home, which is at Summerhaven Road in Sydney, Maine. When this happened, the Androscoggin County Sheriff's Office then contacted the Kennebec County Sheriff's Office, because the home is in their jurisdiction, not in the Androscoggin County Sheriff's Office. So once they were, informed, the County Sheriff's Office of Kennebec then did a well check visit. If you don't know what a well-being check is, it's basically if you think something happened or you haven't seen this person, you then alert the police, and then police will go out and do a well-being check to check and make sure that they're okay. And when this happened, this is when they discovered the remains of a 14-year-old outside of the home. There was a autopsy that has been conducted by the Chief Medical Examiner's Office in Augusta, Maine, which Augusta is the capital. If you didn't know that, a lot of people think it's Portland, but it's Augusta. And a lot of people think it's Bangor, Maine, but it's Augusta. So this being the cause of death is asphyxia, manual strangulation, and sharp force trauma, or sharp force injury. And the death has been ruled a homicide. At this moment, we do know that this is a male 14-year-old that was unalived. 39 Megan-year-old McDonald was taken into custody at 1:45 p.m. yesterday, and there has been the Major Crimes Unit detectives and evidence response techs on the scene, and they have been doing what they need to at the home. The identity of this 14-year-old is being withheld, and there has been no other details released about this. And then the other big thing that happened this week was the school shooting in Stoughton, Wisconsin. No, Madison, Wisconsin. Sorry. Yeah, at a Christian school. So this shooting was done by 80 miles west of Milwaukee, which is the capital of Wisconsin, in Madison, Wisconsin. There was reports of an active shooter before 11 a.m. and the school was evacuated. The officers came through, they swept the school, made sure everybody was okay. There is 2 casualties with this that transpired, and this was a private K through 12 religious school, we'll just say that. When I was looking further into this, I did realize that this school shooting happened 14 years after Sandy Hook. And if you don't know what Sandy Hook is or what happened with that, the Sandy Hook massacre, or Sandy Hook school shooting massacre, happened in Connecticut at Sandy Hook Elementary School. And I remember when this happened. I remember when it was on the news. And it's the school shooting that will always stay with you. And for this to happen almost on the anniversary of Sandy Hook is mind-blowing. Because if you are a millennial like I am, or born in the early 90s, born in the 80s, born in the mid 90s, you would remember this, because that's when a lot of laws for gun control and school shooting implementation trainings started really taking full effect. It wasn't Columbine, which a lot of people think it's going to be Columbine, but no, it was Sandy Hook. I remember learning the protocol for where I needed to hide in every single school that I went to. post Sandy Hook. It was a thing. It was crazy. It was wild. And it's something that my kids will learn about in the future. They know the protocol of what to do during what would take place during a school shooting because they are taught this in school now, especially at the schools that my children go to. This is something that is taught, and it's taught at other schools that are around us, most of the other schools that are around us, because our schools are they're very safe. There is a lot of security in our schools, mainly because we live in a city, but a lot of the smaller schools that are around us as well also have their structures are built similarly. Anywho, let's get back into this. So they've been trying to figure out what the motive of this is. So at Abundant Life Christian School, which is where this took place, 15-year-old Natalie Rupnow. Now, she goes by the name Samantha. That's her own accord. I don't understand why, but she carried a handgun um, and used it to carry out the attack. Now, this apparently there was two handguns found at the scene, one used in the attack and one not used in the attack. So it's possible that maybe she ran out of ammo in the other, then she was going to use the supplemental one. This shooting, it says that a possible motive, search for a possible motive was carried out by the student, and it probes a possible link to a man who said he was planning another mass murder. So they think that these could be possibly linked. Things are very unclear. We do know that she did unalive herself. They are looking through her social media. They are looking through her personal background, like what's happening at home. Her parents divorced and remarried multiple times. That possibly could take effect on her mental health, which a lot of people don't put two and two together. A lot of these things, a lot of what's happening, young adults at school or teenagers at school, a lot of the things that influence them at school happens at home. Um, I do know from what I read a few days after this is that she was in therapy. They do know that she was in contact or appears to have been in contact with a man named Alexander Paffendorf, who's 20 years old and residing in Carlsbad, California. And he allegedly was plotting another mass shooting with her. And this was presented at the San Diego County courthouse and in documents that show it. There was a restraining order filed against him on Tuesday under the red flag law in California. I actually don't know what that is, so I am going to look that up. But apparently it requires him to turn over any ammo and guns that he has within 24 hours, unless an officer asks for them sooner. I would assume that's what the law is, but just in case, I want to look it up for you. Yep, red flag law, or the ERPO, which is the Extreme Risk Protection Order, is a gun law that allows the court to temporarily remove a person's firearms if they are deemed a threat to themselves or anybody else. This this is actually a law in Maine. I didn't know that. Ah, intriguing. It's the things that you learn. I'm surprised that New Hampshire doesn't have it, but I know Vermont, Massachusetts, New Hampshire is the only state in New England that does not have this law. Interesting. Surprised about that actually, because of the gun reform that's here in New Hampshire. Those of whom have died is a teacher, Erin Michelle West, who was 42, and Ruby Patricia Vergara, who's 14. They both passed away at the scene. And there were 6 others that were injured in the shooting. 2 of them were critical at the hospital, but are stable. As of now, they are stable or were in stable condition as of yesterday. The 4 others had minor injuries and they were discharged earlier this week. The assailant, was pronounced dead at the hospital on Monday as a result of a firearm-related trauma, which possibly is a self-inflicted gunshot wound. What we know about her life, like I already mentioned, that her parents were married and divorced. They were looking into neglect, or whether her parents were negligent when it came to this, similar to what happened with Ethan Crumbley's parents, where they furnished him the gun. They knew about his mental health and his well-being, and nothing was really done to curb it. This now comes into question for her parents because they also have not responded or made a comment or anything. They're cooperating with the parents, with the police, which is good because that's not what Ethan Crumbley's parents did. They're cooperating with the police, and when obviously figuring out the backstory, everything like this, parents, the marriage and divorce records and court orders have been obtained, and shows that there's court orders that required the teen in question to split her time between her mother and father's house. The parents have been married twice and divorced twice. Her father has been active on Facebook, posted a picture of his daughter at a shooting range back in August. So it's clear she knew how to shoot weapons. And in this picture as well, she has a black shirt with the band KMFDM on it. So this shows a tie to Columbine. There was lyrics by this band cited by both of the assailants of Columbine. And this song by the band was also featured on a TikTok video, and the 13 people that were killed in Columbine, they were in that video on TikTok. This video was posted moments before the Perry High School shooting that happened in January. This video was posted just before that happened, and that's when a 17-year-old unleashed gunfire on Perry High School, killed a sixth grader and wounded 7 other people. The band itself issued a statement that they were completely sympathetic with the victims and that their music doesn't intend to influence violence. In fact, they stand against violence. So it's very interesting now that they're piecing all these things together because they didn't think of it before and now they're thinking about it now. And I'm hoping that people will now actually take school shootings seriously because it's not something to joke about. All these people, yes, talk about gun control and gun safety, but this female that we're talking about that carried out this shooting went to a gun range with her dad, knew firearm safety, excuse my French, probably knew how to load a carrot into her gun, knows about her actual safety protocols that she should. If she's going to a firing range, you have to do the basics 101, especially if you are a young, like a teenager going with your parent. The teenager has to have basic gun safety in order to go in with their parent. It's just mind blowing now that those that look into these are putting two and two together of basic things that are coming together. Now that video on TikTok could just be, put up at random and didn't know that this other shooting was going to happen. But where there's that common similarity of she's wearing that shirt, the assailants of Columbine cited those lyrics, and that video using that song plus having the 13 victims of Columbine in it goes up moments before the Perry High School shooting, and that happened in Iowa. Iowa is near Wisconsin. Something doesn't jive with me. Something's got to give with and it's not just gun control. People need to get that through their heads. You have to think of safety. You have to teach these generations of kids how to safely evacuate themselves from these situations, how to know how to de-escalate situations like that. Or if you have no control, just figuring out the best point of action for them to get out of this situation. Because if they don't know how to, they're just going to be a sitting duck. And any adult involved in this needs to make anyone aware, which is why I'm happy they do this at my children's school. You need to make them aware that there are situations in which you will have to evacuate from the school, figure out where your safety point is, which is where they will hide and things like that. Which doors are the safety doors? Which rooms are the designated rooms for an evacuation? Which that's actually something that I had to point out to an adult a week ago because they didn't understand why things are placed where they are, why things are spread out, and that's done on purpose, not to keep everybody together. It's done on purpose. And there's a list of everybody that's in certain areas. That's basics. And if they don't understand these protocols, you just simply ask a question. Raise your hand and ask. It's not hard to ask a question. I know adults really have a hard time asking for help, and so do kids now because they're very stubborn and hyper aware that they think they know everything. Well, you don't know everything because you're not asking the correct questions. And unfortunately, that's how society is now, is people are not asking the questions that they should at all. Of course, the other thing that's really prevalent in the news right now is the anniversary of JonBenet Ramsey's death. She passed away or was unalived back on December 26th of 1996 at her home in Colorado, Boulder, Colorado. She's a child beauty queen who was unalived at the age of 6 in her family's home. Now, the resurgence of her case is back in the news, and it's back in the news because of certain things that are now coming out. There is a man that admitted that he did commit this crime. This is still unsolved as of right now, and it's going on almost 3 decades. So this year is 28 years since she's passed away. She's my age. JonBenet, I think I mentioned it before when I talked about her murder, is that of her unaliving, is I remember when this was all over the tabloids. I remember seeing her pictures, her pageant pictures where everything is perfect. I remember seeing her parents interviewed on TV. And then my mom was like a blubbering mess. My dad didn't understand it, and just certain things like that. If you don't know what happened, you can look it up, but it's as simple as this. Before 6 a.m. on the day after Christmas, so on the 26th, Patsy Ramsey, which is JonBenet's mom, made a phone call to 911 because she found a letter on her stairs, and it's a 2.5-page note or letter that states or demands for $118,000 in ransom, which is also the same amount of money that John Ramsey got as a bonus for his job that year. She discovered that her daughter was missing as well before finding this note. This note was left inside of their home, and it like rambles on, talks about withdrawing the $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills, the remainder in $20 bills, which is very specific. And for John, her dad, to put it in a brown paper bag. When you get home, you'll put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on where to deliver it. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early and arrange early delivery of your child. Later that day is when John Ramsey goes into a room in the basement of the home and would find his child with a blanket on her and duct tape on her mouth. John Ramsey then does what any dad would do and pick up his child and disturb the crime scene. Nobody stopped him. The child's body was moved before it should have been. The house was searched or had already been searched prior to finding her body. So it's very peculiar that they didn't hinder him or have a cop go with him, because this room is in the basement of the house, and it's one of the rooms that wasn't checked during the initial search. I talked about this in my video, my standalone video that I did about this, I think on Christmas last year, actually. And it's just the Ramsey family had friends over, they had everything else over, the whole shebang. Everything in the house was a mess. Every single piece of genetic forensics was disrupted. Nothing, all hell broke loose in this crime scene. And everybody in the family, their DNA was tested against an unidentified male's sample of DNA that was left on JonBenet. All of the family was excluded. So Burke, who was 9 at the time, that's her brother, he was excluded. His parents were excluded, although her parents, Patsy and John, were suspects in their daughter's murder for the longest time. They still technically, I think, are suspects because they can't fully rule them out. Patsy died, and John Ramsey has been fighting to keep this case open and to have justice served for his daughter, for his youngest daughter, because he does have other children. They've hired attorneys, they didn't speak to investigators for several months until April of 1997, and then in June of 1998, there was a video of their investigation that was aired on 48 Hours for the first time in 1998, and it shows Patsy being very combative. And also, I will say too, when police interrogate people, they don't take into consideration that, hey, your child just died. So for her to be irritated and agitated, I completely understand. The investigators told her that they had trace evidence that linked her to JonBenet, And Patsy said that's completely impossible and retest it. Patsy would go on to say, I didn't do it. John didn't do it. We all just need to work together to figure out who did this to my child, which I understand. There was more DNA tests that happened again in 2008, and it excluded the entire family yet again. The Boulder district attorney then exonerated the Ramseys and sent them an official letter of apology, which is way too late because they literally just they screwed over their personal relationship with the Ramseys back in 1998 when they did this. The only arrest in the case that I talked about before was John Mark Kerr, who goes by a different name. He lives in Thailand. He claimed that he may have done this to JonBenet, but he was released. Patsy Ramsey, she died in 2006 at the age of 49. John, he remarried in 2011. He's continued to push the Boulder police to figure out what happened to JonBenet. She would have been 34. Yeah, she would have been 34 years old. John Ramsey is very confident that if they retest the sample that they have, they will find out who this male is, because he wants to use the same genetic genealogy that helped identify the Golden State Killer that happened back in 2018, which was that was mind-blowing when that happened. And I talked about that too in my standalone video, that I believe that they should do this because they need to find out exactly who did this to this little girl and finally let this family rest knowing that they know who did this. Whoever did do this will be behind bars and justice will finally be served. So the DNA was found on the garrote that was used to strangle her, a rope found in the guest room, and a blanket. So all of these have DNA on them that could be tested. But the Boulder Police Department refutes this and said that they are not testing any of this evidence. So if John Ramsey goes above their head, which he has been trying to do, he will push for the state of Colorado to test this. So Boulder police in their statement released that the assertion that there's viable evidence and leads they are not pursuing, which includes DNA testing, and it says that it's completely false, which they would have already tested it if they wanted to go down that road, but it seems that they are not going down this road. So John Ramsey, he obviously has been living under like this cloud of suspicion, which we all know we've known since 1996. And he said that they are extremely still devastated and crushed by what happened to JonBenet. He speaks out about it more now because he wants justice, not just for him, for JonBenet, for him and his son Burke and his two older children from his first marriage, to finally know exactly what happened to her, to identify who did this, to change the lives, to put a positive change in their lives rather than have this cloud of negativity over them of not knowing, because it can cause grief. It's a buildup of grief that you never want to live with. And if they are able to do this, they then will able to have a huge step in the right direction for fixing the way that police and others investigate certain crimes, especially cold case crimes. John Ramsey is seeing to work with the Homicide Victims Families Rights Act, which would allow the victim's family to request a federal review of their case, which I hope he gets, because he's been there, the entire family's been drug around for the last almost 30 years. And from day one of having investigators on the scene that have never investigated a homicide before, something's wrong. You have cops that are not sealing a scene, the people are still inside the house, the people are having their friends over to help them, people are cleaning the scene while there's an active crime scene present, and you still have all these people in the house. That is no. Everybody that was involved in this case, there should have been a lawsuit against them, because that's malpractice in a way. You refused to follow protocol. You didn't follow any protocol whatsoever. You destroyed a crime scene. You let a man pick up his child at the crime scene, disturbing all forensic evidence that was there. Anything that was on JonBenet that John disrupted, it's all trashed now because his DNA is on there too. So that would be the only reason why his DNA would be on there is because he picked up her, brought her upstairs. Like in my lifetime, this is one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen. Horrifying. And not just it's not the crime that horrifies me, it's the way it's handled. The way this has always been handled has always horrified me. I hope that there possibly in the future there will be a reform of law enforcement because we seriously need it. We need a reform for law enforcement, education, the whole shebang. Because something's got to give at one point. Something's going to happen, and then there's going to be a huge mess because it's going to happen with a police officer, whether the violence is on the police officer or not. And who's going to pay for it? Not law enforcement, everybody else. That's who's going to pay for it. So that, my friends, is this week's kind of true crime recap. Apologies for my absence, but I'll see you in my next one.